So it's like 5 o'clock on Monday and I'm not feeling well, like, at all particularly. I have like a really bad migraine that has just basically ruined my entire weekend. I started getting it on Thursday, and when I get migraines I don't just get like a headache, I get like feeling like I'm about to vomit pretty much all the time, so that's not very nice. And so I haven't really been able to like move my head off a pillow very much. But I've been lying in bed all day and all I've been wanting to do is just watch Doctor Who again and watch reviews of Doctor Who again. So every time I watch a new review I think of more things I have to say. I have like, if I wait until I'm feeling better, maybe I will not have as much to say because it won't be as fresh in my mind. So I'm just gonna make this video anyway, even though it's probably gonna be quite short and varying quality to my previous few because I'm not feeling great. And I'm lucky, a lot of people have been getting really bad colds and I've just got like a head cold. So like I've got temperature and I'm quite sweaty, but it's freezing because it's Manchester. And seem a bit pukey. I just wanted to anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and just talk for a bit before I forget any of my ideas. So this is a review of episode 3, series 11 of Doctor Who series, of Doctor Who. The first season with Jodie Whittaker. The episode was called Rosa and it was dealing with Rosa Parks and her refusing to give up her seat for a white man on a bus, which led to the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott. And it's the first historical episode we've gotten with this new Doctor and this new production team, and it was brilliant. It was really good. I don't want this to become a theme every week. I'm like, this is the best episode of a series, even though that would be exciting, but I think this is the best episode of a series. And even though like Arachnids in the UK, I love a good domestic story, it doesn't look like it's going to be quite as good as this episode. And it had a lot to prove, this episode, because Doctor Who has never done a story that specifically tackles racism before in the main canon. I don't know if it's done it in Big Finish, but it hasn't done it in the main canon. So it was so, like, exciting, and for a lot of people justifiably nerve-wracking. I wasn't anxious that they were going to do it wrong because I trust Mallory Blackman. I feel like a lot of fans that have the loudest voices won't have read her books or are American. I think her book literally got banned there. Like, it wasn't published in America until 2003 because it came out just before 9/11 and it dealt with a lot of like issues surrounding terrorism. But she wrote the Noughts and Crosses series, which is what I'm talking about, by the way, which was this just absolutely brilliant sci-fi dystopia book. Like, I'm gonna go. It's better than the Hunger Games. I'm gonna go out there and say it. It like really shaped. It was really like the precursor to that whole like dystopia thing of like teen dystopias and like having romance being a big part of it and everything. And it really didn't get enough credit. I think just because it was British and it was dealing with race issues. But it was just this fantastic book, and she was Children's Laureate for a bit. She might still be Children's Laureate. And the thing that really like hit me about that book series was that I'm from East London, which is like historically quite a diverse area, and so I was never somebody who like how do I put this? I've always lived in a very diverse area, and I've always lived in like a community that always puts the idea of having different cultures as a really important part of your community like forward and is always like ever present. However, that also led to like obviously me being white and middle class and everything. Obviously, it also led to me not really understanding a lot of the more intricate details about like modern day racism and issues surrounding that. And this book and Noughts and Crosses really introduces and explores those ideas in such clever ways. And I just think it's just such a brilliant work of fiction. And you know what, it deserves a Netflix series, it does. I don't think it's ever actually had a TV or film adaptation. There was a play a couple of years ago with Richard Madden, who I think he's a bit old now, but I would still like to see him play Callum. But hopefully, if Mallory Blackman's doing Doctor Who and she does a couple more like TV things, then maybe like she could be executive producer on the Netflix series of Noughts and Crosses. Please don't make that happen. That would be excellent. But anyway, so my main point was that I was very excited for this episode because it's Mallory Blackman. So anyway, I was excited for this episode. I had faith that Mallory Blackman would do it justice, and I think she has. I think that this series of Doctor Who has really been doing what I wanted it to do in the Stephen Moffat era, where it, like, really embraces the drama aspects of the series and really puts the characters and the stories of even the supporting characters forward as, like, an important, well, just as important, just part of the DNA of the story. And so this episode really did that, like, brilliantly. Vinette Robinson, who was in 42 and Sherlock and The A Word, played Rosa Parks, and she was very good. But my overall mark would be, I'm going to give it 8.7. I considered giving it a 9, but I feel like it's not quite there. You know, I feel like 9s are reserved for, like, really good, like, finales and stuff, so it's not quite there for me. So I think, given my synopsis of why I really like Mallory Blackman, I'm now going to go into spoilers for the actual episode. So yeah, should I go good, bad, or should I just discuss them? I'm going to try doing good, bad. So a lot of things stood out to me about this episode as being very good. Every week we're getting more of a feel of, like, the pace and the rhythm of the show. I like the fact that this one kind of started pretty much in media res, like, we didn't have, like, a big, even though we had, like a cold open, like what would be, like, usually a pre-title sequence of Rosa getting on the bus and getting thrown off by the same bus driver, which is historically accurate apparently. It wasn't, when we go to see the companions, we didn't have, like, a little bit of, like, I don't know, sometimes you have episodes where they're sort of talking about how they're bored or something, you end up having slightly too much banter. I feel like this, like, perfectly had the right amount of, like, we're getting thrown into a situation and we're going to start, like, you know, hit the ground running from here. And it was great, and I feel like we're really starting to feel the chemistry of the actors a lot more in this episode. I feel like in the first 2 episodes, because we spent a lot of time having just spent a lot of time keep putting them all together quite a lot. We got a sense of the 4 of them as a group, but not as 4 of them as individuals, and as the individual relationships that were going to be formed between that. And so I really liked, in this episode, we got, so far we've mainly been getting Graham and Ryan, and then the Doctor talking to the surrounding characters and not giving Yaz enough to do. In this episode, number one, I think this episode has utilised having 4 companions the best so far. Because when we were figuring out how to stop the villain, everybody had their own role to go and play. And that all worked, you know, quite smoothly. Also in this episode, we got the unlikely pairings in that scene in the motel where we had the Doctor and Graham both being quite funny, and Bradley Walsh saying that he invented the iPhone, that he's Steve Jobs, which was just a very good joke. And then we had the scene between Yaz and Ryan when they're talking about the way that racism impacts them in the modern day, and that was obviously, like, a very good and important scene. Also, like, I really am starting to see, like, I've suspected it since day one, I'm starting to see them, like, setting up Ryan and Yaz for, like, a potential romantic relationship. Just because that's usually what they do when they have 3 companions. They will have, usually they would have, like, a younger person, and then 2, like, you know, male and female, like, companions that would have, like, a love line, like Ian and Barbara and Ben and Polly and Jamie and Victoria and stuff. So I imagine, like, they'll probably end up, like, kissing or something by the end of the season, but I like the fact they're, like, building up their relationship. I like that a lot more than, like, Amy and Rory, whose relationship, like, you know, I like Arthur Darvill, and I like Amy, but, like, their relationship, I never bought it, and it always seemed a bit like she never really liked him that much. I didn't really have much chemistry, so I'm preferring this, like, you know, slow burn that we're probably going to be getting between Ryan and Yaz. These reviews, I always try and make them seem like there's any sort of, like, structure and logic, and I do write down notes and everything, but most of the time it's just sort of me talking with, like, just all, like, various random things that come into my brain, so I do apologise. If you want a structured Doctor Who review, go and watch What Culture or something, don't come here. Next thing I want to talk about is the villain, Krasko, because he was sort of there, and, like, he definitely, like, the whole concept of him is really interesting. But the thing is, the whole concept of this episode is really interesting. And I felt like the concept was more important than him individually as a villain. I also sort of felt like this episode, I feel like this is happening a lot in this season, in that the villains feel like, not like they're like boring or anything, but they slightly feel like they're underdeveloped. I just think that's probably because they were given, instead of 45 minutes, to be given 50 minutes. But in hindsight, the production team must have thought that was much more time than it actually is in terms of putting story to screen, because it feels like we could have just had like a couple more scenes like explaining slightly more about his backstory. I mean, I have seen the interpretation that his backstory doesn't really matter because he's just a neo-Nazi. He doesn't have a logical reason for being a dickhead, which is fair enough. But I don't know. I would have appreciated it because he's such a misnomer in this story. You kind of like forget he exists entirely. Though I have to say, I did really like the scenes where Jodie like is telling him off and breaks his vortex manipulator and just messes with his whole storyline. But then again, like, what? How does he know what a TARDIS is? That's quite an important plot point. Like, if he's like a time meddling monk or something, they could have just said he's a time agent. They could have just said something really like a throwaway line, just explaining how he has this knowledge other than I'm from the 51st century, because like I don't even know what time period Gallifrey is from. Like, I think Susan says she was born in the 42nd century in the pilot or something, but like, you know, I'm pretty sure that Gallifrey exists like outside of time, like literally nowadays because it's time locked. So I don't really understand how like somebody that didn't have like an intimate connection with that whole structure of time travel would know about that. One of the things that I really enjoyed in this story was like, the number one, the fact that it wasn't pulling its punches or pulling its slaps, quite literally, because the villain isn't really the villain is the time period, and the villain is like the bystanders and the people who are actively being nasty to Ryan and stuff. I really like the fact they had that scene where Yaz is wondering whether she is considered coloured or not. Like, that was an interesting question to have, because I just think it's going to be interesting just for the sake of diversity in the show that they're going to obviously go back to her about the background of Punjab, and they're going to make a point of the fact that racism towards different backgrounds is very different and very separate and based on different history, but it's also like all interlinked and everything. So that was just interesting to me. I think that I really like a Doctor Who episode where you're thinking about it the next day, and when you think about like Doctor Who episodes, you're like, oh, that one was brilliant. You think of the episodes that made you sort of sit back and like consider the way that you look at the world and the way that other people look at the world, and just how that all came together. I'm not American, and I know quite a lot about the civil rights movement, but I don't know as much as some people, and I probably don't know as much as you're even like taught on the curriculum in the US about it. Well, I suppose one of the things I really liked was the fact that she was Rosa Parks was shown as being like part of the struggle, but also shown as like getting on with her day to day. I was in two minds about the final scene where the Doctor says how she changed the universe, and she shows him the asteroid and shows her finally getting the medal at the end. I think I did like it. I did like it because it's meant to be educational, and this story most of the time it showed and it didn't tell. Like, obviously, you would hope that most of the viewership knows that racism is wrong, but a lot of the time, especially in school in the UK, you're sort of told about segregation, but you're not told about like the reality of like Emmett Till, who was a 14-year-old boy that was like murdered for talking to a white woman in the South when he was just coming like for like a holiday. It's just disgusting and just heartbreaking. And so I think like not shying away from showing the reality of it is important. Just for any TV show, like not even any TV show that's going to be historical, needs to not shy away from not only racism but like showing like the fact that the past isn't a rosy tinted, you know, Frank Sinatra playing in the background, everybody's white and they all get along perfectly era. It's obviously not. It's really good Doctor Who's had an episode about it, because the first episode I can think of, I think where Martha was the first main black companion, and in the Shakespeare Code, the Doctor says that she can just walk around like she owns the place and she won't get harassed, which, it's just so inaccurate. Like, I feel like the point they were trying to make is that black people have existed in London for ages, and of course they existed in Shakespeare's time because there are black people in Shakespeare's plays. However, saying that there's not discrimination, particularly under the reign of Elizabeth II, who, like, more other people know more about than me, but she specifically brought in racist laws, and it's like the Stuart era was really the time period where the UK got heavily, you know, the UK started the slave trade and they got really heavily involved in it. So just to have a scene where it's said that if you just walk around like you own the place, then you won't get harassed is lazy writing. And then we went back to it in Thin Ice and we made more a point of it, and I really liked that episode. And I can't remember, there was some channel on YouTube that's more popular than I am that said, oh, but why does the Doctor punch her? He punched that guy, he doesn't even do anything to Bill. And I just sort of thought, how can you be so unaware of yourself that you didn't really understand? Number one, this guy is dealing in slaves, and number two, he just shouldn't be allowed to speak to anybody like that, particularly not Bill. And so Doctor was absolutely right to punch him in the face, and I don't even think it was out of character. I think that that Doctor had gotten so protective of people, but at the end of the day he was still kind of a grumpy old man underneath. So, what I would like to talk about in that vein is the news coverage of this episode, because, you know, I'm online and the main source where people can talk about things is like Twitter and stuff, and so yeah, the main thing on Twitter has been like just resoundingly positive, and usually that is a place where people moan and moan and moan about if there's anything remotely political in any TV show ever, even if it's like, I've seen people complain about like women on Mock the Week making everything political, which honestly, why the fuck are you watching Mock the Week if you don't want people to make things political? But there you go. So a lot of the news coverage has said it's divided bands, it's been a really controversial episode, and it's exactly the same thing that they did when Jodie was announced the Doctor, where like an independent like branding company or something actually looked through the amount of people that were reacting negatively, and it actually turned out to be like 60-70% positive, which has been backed up by the fact that The Woman That Fell to Earth was the most first episode for a Doctor in the history of the show, and yet people were still saying that it's all incredibly controversial and it's going to kill the show. And it's like, if there was an election, and let's use the British parliamentary model here, if there was an election and say one party wins 70%, 77% of the vote, something like, you know, like that, like a landslide victory, and all of the individual seats, all of the MPs won like the massive majority of the votes in that area, would you then, as a journalist, say, well, actually, this election was very controversial because Brian in Reading thinks that his candidate should have won instead, even though his candidate got 133 votes, and the person that won the election got 25,000 votes. Like, that's not controversial. You're looking for controversy, and you're actually making the voices of people that are like being negative louder. Just like for what reason? Like, for debate? That's not what a debate is. Like, if you want a fucking debate, like all the debates that are happening in the country right now, and you're trying to make a TV show where the majority of people have had really positive reactions into it, into a really controversial thing, when it's actually, it's not. You're making people that don't have an audience, and giving them more of an audience. If you are a journalist and you are quoting other people's Twitter, then quite frankly, you should hand over your degree right now, because that is not integrity, and that is not even you, having the guts to write your own fucking opinion. That's just you relying on whatever somebody else has said, because you, I don't know, because you want a quick paycheck or something, which is, a fair enough thing. But if you're a newspaper, and you think, and your way of telling a major news story is not through your, qualified research professionals writing up their own pieces of information with, reliable sources. Instead, your mode of transmitting news is quoting Brian from Twitter, who got 3 likes, and then quoting, Louisa from Twitter, who got 250 likes, and saying this is an equal argument. It's obviously not. And also, if that's what your newspaper is relying on, then quite frankly, publishing should just die, because that's lazy. And you should not be trying to keep up with all these, youth things. You should be providing the facts, and you should be providing researched opinions. And if you're having a debate, if you're trying to show a TV debate between 2 people, if you are the qualified journalist, you should say, actually, that one's right, that one has more facts towards it, because that's what fucking journalism is. That's the whole point of having newspapers. So, yeah, I'm just getting frustrated with it. I'm getting frustrated with people saying there's massive controversy when there isn't, quite frankly. Now I'm going to get on to some more, wider points. I liked the music, and initially, in the final scene, where Rosa refuses to give up her seat, and they played that pop song, I was like, oh, pop music in Doctor Who doesn't really work. But after listening to it, I was actually, number one, this song is a banger. It's a great song. I downloaded it on Spotify afterwards. And number two, it immediately reminded me of Selma, and I need to think of another example, don't I? So I'm more well-known, well-versed in these kind of issues. It reminded me of films like that really are engaging with the fact that a lot of the big singing voices in the civil rights movement were black women, and there were people what's her name, Nina Simone, and Aretha Franklin, R.I.P., and all these other women that had a background in gospel choir, who provided these really inspirational, almost kind of church-like songs of solidarity and of just resistance. And I've been researching that song. Apparently it's considered the unofficial anthem of the Black Power movement, and it was sung the 2016 Democratic Rally, so it has all those anti-Trump implications to it. So I like the fact they had this modern pop song that was in the style of the blues movement and of all these great female singers, great black female singers who have been involved in the civil rights movement for years and years. And that kind of also brings me to another minor point I had. When Rosa takes Ryan back to her house and introduces her to all the other people in I think it's just the NAACP, I think that's it. When she does that, you meet Martin Luther King, which I think is the first time we've met him in Doctor Who, and he's such a big historical figure. I was like, whoa, should we be doing that? Should we be making him a character who you see for one scene when he's such an important figure, and we might have to come back to him and get a different actor, and that'd be weird and everything. But I was kind of do you know what? That's completely fine, because I have seen films based around the life of Martin Luther King in which Rosa Parks and other famous female activists have been background characters. And so this is the first series of Female Doctor. It's redressing the balance, and this extends to centering civil rights stories about black women, and how they were also figureheads of that movement. Also, another minor thing is just that conversation they had in the hotel where they were talking about how much Grace was really was the spirit of Rosa. I still think, considering they've been fecking kidnapped, that Grace didn't need to die for them to have that like emotional response to that conversation. I still think killing her off was a waste, quite frankly. And until they convince me otherwise of like a really emotional scene, probably always going to think that during this series, which is just a bit depressing. Yes, I'm going to end it here because my flatmate's back. And I feel really sick anyway. Like and subscribe because you see that I make these even when I'm sick. So I have, committed. And comment, like, opinions and stuff, please. I'm going to make another one of these next week with my brothers, who, if you have subscribed to my channel for a while, you may recognise from such hits such as Was Twice Upon a Time a Turning Point video essay of sorts, and Siblings Review The Last Jedi, which honestly I think those two videos are like the funniest videos on my channel. So give them a watch. My brothers are like funny people, so it will probably be much longer than this though, and it'll probably take me much longer to edit because we just talk way too much. And there's so many ums and ahs, it's quite annoying. That concludes this episode of me looking really pasty and talking about Doctor Who. Goodbye.